Hello everyone, this is Genius Yoshi and today we're going to be rating all of the Amethyst cards. So let's bounce around and check the ratings real quick. 5 star is 5 star, 4 star is pretty good, 3 stars I'll play if I have to, it's okay, I kind of couldn't decide on rating really. 2, cards bad most of the time, I'll be playing it, you shouldn't. And 1, well, no one should be playing this. If it's not a pretty card, well, probably shouldn't even go in your binder, so I'm not sure why they printed it. So let's move on and check the ratings. Here we have Arthur, Wizard's Apprentice, a 1/3/4/3 non-inkable quest for 1, pretty much as weak as stats get. But his ability, Student, whenever he quests, you may return another chosen character of yours to your hand to gain 2 lore. So he can effectively quest for 3, bring one of your enter the battlefield abilities character back in your hand, so that you can play it again, which you can use for healing. Synergizes very well with the Madam Min and Merlin type of synergies that we're seeing in this set. So good synergy there, quests for a lot, but his stats are fairly weak. So when you activate his ability, Arthur is likely to go down in challenge. If you can protect him and make use of that ability to get good effects, he's going to be extremely powerful. But because he becomes a sitting duck and he's not inkable in the 3 slot, I think we're going to have trouble finding just the right time to put him into play unless you're already winning the game. So because of that, I'm going to give him a 3-star rating because I think there's a lot of challenges playing the card, but his ability can be quite powerful. And if you get to resolve it 2 or 3 times and get your combo going, this card will win you the game. Here we have a Blue Fairy, rewarding good deeds, a 1/1/2 inkable quest for 1. As weak stats as it gets, but she is evasive, so that's nice. It means she can quest for free as long as the opponent doesn't play her nemesis, Tinkerbell. But her ability, whenever you play a Floodborn character, you may draw a card. Ooh, that's really good. Repeatable card draw on an invasive character that is cheap to play. Win, win, win. Is what I'm saying. Just be careful about stuff that pings. Mostly Tinkerbell, Hans, the Robin Hood, grab your sword, pretty much anything steel really. But against something like a Ruby Amethyst type of deck, Blue Fairy is really nice. Now granted, the Floodborn characters are typically quite expensive, but I mean, you have an invasive threat on the board. The second you can draw a card off of her, she's already paid for herself. If you can draw a second card, well, it's benefits and it just keeps on stacking. I really like this card. I think it's definitely worth a 4-star rating. And yeah, rewarding good deeds with a good rating. Next up, we have Archimedes. Chip the Teacup, 2/2 for 1 with no ability, inkable. This is the same thing as Archimedes. We don't need 2 like this. I'm going to give it a 1-star rating. Maybe it deserves 2-star because Archimedes is played and I think Chip looks a bit better, so he might be included in some decks. But really, this brings nothing new to what we already have. Here we have Dr. Facilier, the Savvy Opportunist, 4/2/4/4, inkable, quest for 1, evasive. Evasive, that quest for 1, it's not really what I'm looking for when I'm looking at a 4-drop. I mean, he has combat power and evasive, and doesn't quest for a lot. So what do you want me to do with him? Sing Friends on the other side? Yeah, there's better options for that. Like an invasive character that can actually quest for 2. Just saying. Overall, disappointing card, doesn't really have a purpose in life, so I'm going to give him a 1-star rating. Here we have Elsa, Gloves Off, a 3/4 Challenger 3 quest for 1. And she's 4-drop inkable. She reminds me of the 4-drop Elsa that we have right now. Did you remember that we have a 4-drop Elsa right now? No, because she's not good, and so is this card. 1-star rating it is. Very pretty though. Here we have the Fairy Godmother, here to help. A 3/7 quest for 2 for 5. 3/7 for 5. That's a lot of willpower. A lot. I mean, we've seen just how impactful Stitch Surfer Dude, Tamatoa, and how hard they are to remove as 7/8 drops. Now imagine you can get that on 5. Granted, it's not 4/8, it's 3/7. She still quests for 2. So she's a nice, big threat. Kind of like that 5-drop Maleficent that we have. That's 3/5 quest for 3. Yes, she quests for more, but the extra 2 willpower on Fairy Godmother is actually pretty big. Even as an uncommon, I think this is deserving of a 4-star rating. She's a big threat that deserves to be answered, and if you combat with Fairy Godmother a few more times, well, she brings out her wand and starts poking you with it 3 at a time and deals quite a bit of damage. So I like this card. I think it's going to see some play, even as a vanilla character. Here we have Fairy Godmother, the Mystic Armorer, a 3/4 for 5, quests for 2. Stats line? A little poor, but not too bad, as long as she has a good ability. Whenever this character quests, your characters gain Challenger +3. Don't like Challenger that much. And when this character is banished in a challenge, return this card to your hand this turn. Am I reading this right? Am I? All your characters are suddenly bloodlusting beasts just ready to challenge and take out whatever your opponent has. Not only that, but when they get banished in the process, they come back to your hand. So suddenly that 3-drop Maleficent that just 2/2 draw a card comes back to your hand and hit for 5. I mean, your opponent can't do very much questing if you have Fairy Godmother and a couple more characters on the board, because your characters are just going to destroy their board on the swing back and you're going to get them all back into your hand. It's very, very strong and well deserving of a 5-star rating, as I think this is one of the strongest legendaries in full set. Pretty high bar, but we'll see. We'll see as we review the other ones. 5-star for now. I'm impressed. Next we have Fairy Godmother, Pure of Heart, a 3/4 for 3, inkable, quest for 1. Whenever you play a character named Cinderella, you may exert chosen character. Okay. So first of all, she has the exact stats line as the wardrobe, which is the strongest stats line that you can see on the vanilla 3-drop. She comes with an upside, and that upside's pretty good. Force exerting opponent's character give you an out to prevent them from doing their first quest. And there aren't that many, although we're getting more ways of doing that. But Fairy Godmother has this nice ability as long as you're playing a handful of Cinderellas in your deck. She's also a shift target for the amazing Fairy Godmother that we've seen earlier. And because of that, I think this is quite a playable card. And I'm going to give her a 4-star rating, and I'm actually starting to look quite forward to playing a Fairy Godmother deck. Here we have Hey Hey, the Persistent Presence, a 2/1 for 2, inkable, quest for 1, and whenever he's banished into combat, return it to your hand. That seems good. It means you can play him, go to combat, play him, go to combat, and he just keeps on coming back. But it gets better. You can play him early as board presence, and then you can trade it for some damage with an opponent's character, get it back to hand, add the opportune time to ink it, if you so desire, because he is inkable, which is a very nice combination. It's an early play that doesn't really cost you a card in hand, which is great if you're trying to go big, like with an Elsa Spirit of Winter, for example. You can just also abuse effects like Rush. If you can give Hey Hey Rush, then you can essentially use him as a free 2 damage spell, which is also pretty nice. So the Zombie Chicken I really like, and well deserving of a 4-star rating. Here we have Jiminy Cricket, Pinocchio's Conscience. It's a 1/2 for 2, quest for 1, evasive character. So a 2-drop evasive, full-time evasive, is actually pretty rare and quite decent, even though he's only questing for 1. And his ability, when you play him, if you have a Pinocchio in play, you may draw a card. Okay, so we already see the 3-drop Maleficent see play as a 2/2, quest for 1, draw card. Jiminy Cricket sacrifices 1 power to gain evasive, and evasive is much better. Jiminy Cricket costs 1 less. So if you can trigger that draw card, Jiminy Cricket is a fantastic card. Okay, so Jiminy Cricket is pretty much as good as playing Pinocchios in your deck. And the Pinocchios are quite decent and have some kind of... They go well with bounce abilities, so maybe some of that min-min strategy going on. And Jiminy Cricket is a fantastic card to bounce because he draws you a card and he's a cheap interaction. So Jiminy Cricket goes pretty well with bounce. Pinocchio goes decently with bounce. There's a handful of Pinocchios in the set that are quite decent. So Jiminy Cricket is almost a must if you're playing Pinocchios in your deck. If you're playing two different Pinocchios in 4 copies, you should be playing Jiminy Cricket. It's a very good card. And because of that, it deserves a 4-star rating. Very playable. Following from our 2-drop Cricket, we have the 2-drop Cusco, the Wanted Llama. Not nearly as good as his other version, the King sitting on the throne. Basically, when he gets transformed into a llama, he loses all of his stats, all of his questing power, and he's just, well, hiding. So, okay, where am I? When this character is banished, you may draw a card. So by opposition to Jiminy Cricket, which enters the battlefield, draws a card, you need to actually lose your Cusco to draw the card. So you're gaining that card much later, and you need to have some kind of sacrifice outlet to get rid of your Cusco or send him to combat and have combat to use him. But with his poor stats line, that's unlikely to make a big impact. The lore count is weak, so it's unlikely the opponent is going to want to challenge it. So really, what is the Wanted Llama doing? Probably wanted for his past life, because in this form, he's not doing much for me. I'm going to give him a 2-star rating. The rating might increase if we have sacrifice matter types of archetypes. And then having something that you can just... a cheap character that you can cash in for a card and trigger that sacrificial effect. Cusco could become pretty decent then. But for now, 2-star rating. Here we have Madame Min Fox. Whenever you play this character, banish her or return chosen character of yours to your hand. And it's a 4/3 rush for 3 inkable, quest for 1. So this is almost an upgrade to Rafiki. So if we forget about the cost, she's inkable, she has better stats than Rafiki's, and she still has the rush with the 1 quest. So similar but better. The only downside is that you must have a character on the battlefield that you're bouncing to your hand. So you're sacrificing a bit of tempo to play Madame Min. But you get the upside of being able to return enter the battlefield effect characters that you get to play to double up on their benefits. You can also use it to heal your characters. You can easily just include some 1-drops to put in play, bounce them back with Madame Min, and then ink the 1-drop because you don't need it anymore. So I really like this card. I think it's going to see some play, and especially with all of the other Madame Min Merlin synergies that we have, I'm going to give this card a 4-star rating. And here comes the dragon, Madame Min, in her final form, the Purple Dragon. 5/7 for 7, quests for 4. And she's evasive. Reminds us of Mickey Mouse Brave Little Tailor, but for 1 less ink. So what's the downside with this card? Well, I win when you play this character. Banish her, or return 2 chosen characters of yours to your hand. So, like the other Madame Mins, basically you must bounce characters back into your hand in order to play this card. So it can be an upside, but it's also a cost. It means that this Madame Min is just ink fodder unless you have at least two other characters in play, which is no small feat to do. You're also going to be losing a bunch of tempo by bouncing these characters back into your hand. So in a regular deck, definitely do not include. There are better options out there. In the I bounce everything of mine deck, where you're playing a bunch of cheap characters that you're bouncing back to play the Madame Mins, well, that can be interesting because suddenly the downside becomes an upside or a neutral. The fact that it's 2 characters is still quite a bit of a cost, but you can turn that cost into kind of an even because you're losing tempo, but you're gaining value, and you're putting out a pretty powerful threat. So I think she's going to be included in that deck. Anyways, she's inkable, so she can just go and sit in your ink pool early on, and later in the game she becomes quite a potent threat. I mean, 5/7 questing for 4 evasive? That's hard. it's a big threat that must be answered by the opponent. So overall, Madam Min, I'm going to give a 3-star rating. She's going to be decent in the Madam Min deck, but not great anywhere else. Here we have Madam Min, Rival of Merlin, 2/5 for 5 in Kabul, quest for 2, shift 3. Lots of numbers. Numbers are okay, a little weak on the combat side, but the 5 willpower is welcomed. Her ability, Gruesome and Grim, just like the song of the same name, allows you to play a character that costs 4 or less for free, and they gain Rush. And having access to that effect on a character repeatedly and on the song, which you can sing for free, is great because it gives you consistency. And the effect can be quite powerful, especially with Merlins that you can bounce back to your hand with Madam Min, or just anything that you can bounce back to your hand with Madam Min's abilities from the other Madam Mins. So she goes very well in Madam Min based decks, being the rival of Merlin that she is, but also in some other strategies where I'm not sure. I'm sure there's some combo potentials with Madam Min, and people will come up with these combos. If you want to see my combos, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out. But for now, I will give Madam Min a 4-star rating. Here we have another Madam Min, Madam Min Snake, 3/3 for 2, Inkable, quest for 1, with the Madam Min typical ability. When you play this character, banish her, which you really don't want, or return another character that you control back into your hand. Okay, so she's basically a big beater that forces you to bounce a character back into your hand. That's not great. But if you look at it the other way, she's a 2-costed card that allows you to return a character back to your hand and gives you some stats on the board. Now that becomes more interesting. So you don't really want to play her as an aggressive 3/3, you really want to play her as a bounce spell, a self-bounce spell, and one of these Merlin type decks. And in particular, with Merlin in play, you can play a Madam Min Snake to bounce a Madam Min Snake, to play a Madam Min Snake to bounce a Madam Min Snake, and you have a 2-card combo, well 3 if you include Merlin, 2 if you don't want to count Madam Min twice, but you really should. So Madam Min Snake, some interesting uses in terms of combo, some interesting bounce uses. But overall, by herself, she's not that powerful of a card. So I'm going to give her a 3-star rating. Definitely an inclusion in certain combo type decks and bouncy decks, but not a must play in everything. Here we have Merlin the Crab, 3/3 for 3, Inkable, quest for 1, subpar stats, but he comes with the ability, whenever you play him or whenever he leaves play, you can get Challenger 3 to your character. So your character can suddenly become a big beater. By itself, it's a pretty weak card with a pretty weak ability, but in the Madam Min deck, when you bounce your stuff around all the time, and you have these weak characters that you're using to bounce stuff all the time, getting that big combat boost, potentially twice in a turn, can be impactful. So I don't think it's going straight into the bin where I will never look, the gone to bin, let's call it. But it's not a great card, so I'm going to settle for a 2-star rating on Merlin Crab. Here we have Merlin the Goat, 4/3 for 4, quest for 1, average stats. But whenever you play it, and whenever he leaves play, you gain 1 lore. Now that is a pretty strong ability. Now of course the Merlin Lady Min combo is all about bouncing a bunch of characters back and forth, playing them over and over again, and Merlin Goat, if you can activate that ability, gain 1 lore, gain 1 lore, gain 1 lore, gain 1 lore, and keep on bouncing, and you get to quest and bounce and combat, you can gain a ton of lore. But just by itself, the fact that you're playing a beater and gaining 2 lore, even if you just play the goat, go to combat and fight something and take it out, you've still gained 2 lore from this card, which is pretty good for an inkable 4-drop. So I really like Merlin's goat form, one of his favorite form of mine, and we're probably going to be seeing it in a lot of decks coming soon. Here we have Merlin Rabbit, a 2/3 quest for 1 very weak stat line for a 4-drop. With the ability Hippity Hop, Hippity Hip, when you play it, and when he leaves play, you may draw a card. So you play Merlin, you immediately cash in for 1 card, and then when he goes to get banished, you reap the interests on Merlin, get another card. Now, one thing to notice is that it says when he leaves play. So if you bounce Merlin, and if he jumps, because he's a rabbit, back to your hand, then you get the extra card. Then you get to play Merlin again, get an extra card. So there's some cool shenanigans to do with Merlin. I would like him much better if he was inkable. I think as a non-inkable 4-drop, it's a bit iffy. But right now, the 3-drop Maleficent sees a lot of play and draws just 1 card as a 2/2. Merlin is very similar, but fits in the 4-drop in your curve. So as long as you can afford the non-inkability, then Merlin's a bit of an upgrade. So I kind of like Merlin. I'm going to give him a 3-star rating. I really want to give him 4-star, but the lack of inkability is going to downgrade him to 3. Here we have Merlin in his raw form, the Shapeshifter. 1/5 for 4, inkable, quest for 1. So this is similar to Rapunzel's stats, except that Rapunzel quests for 1 more and has a super duper awesome ability entering the battlefield. So what does Merlin say for his defense? Well, he enters a battle of wits. Whenever one of your other characters is returned to your hand from play, he can quest for 1 more this turn. Okay, so if you bounce 1 character, he quests like Rapunzel, still without the super good ability. Which means that to make this card worth it, you need to be able to bounce multiple characters back to your hand in 1 turn. In general, this is hard to do, but we've also spoiled a lot of Lady Mins in this set. In particular, there's a 2-drop Lady Min that allows you to bounce another character. So with Merlin Shapeshifter in play, you can actually combo out Lady Min, bounce Lady Min, play Lady Min, bounce Lady Min, and suddenly, for 2 ink, you can increase Merlin's questing ability by 1, which can be quite powerful. So I think that Merlin Shapeshifter is going to be mostly a combo-ish card. Otherwise, well, he's fairly resilient with his 5 willpower, and he's going to be probably only played in that Merlin Lady Min deck, where you're just bouncing a bunch of characters you own back to your hand, trying to activate these abilities and reuse the enter the battlefield, exit the battlefield abilities time and time again. And maybe Merlin Shapeshifter is going to be worth it in that deck, in particular because in the late game you can start just spamming Lady Mins, bouncing themselves back into your hand, and Merlin can quest for done. So I think he has a good home there. I don't think he's in... Well, I'm gonna give him the 3-star rating, because I think he's decent there, but not really anywhere else. Here we have another shape of Merlin, Merlin Squirrel. 2/1 for 2, quest for 1. Yikes. These are not good stats. But look before you leap. Whenever you play this character and when he leaves play, typical Merlin ability, triggers twice. Look at the top card of your deck, you may put it on top or the bottom. So this doesn't generate any card advantage, it's really just looking for combo pieces. And from what we have in this set, with the amount of Merlins and Lady Mins, you're not really looking for a very specific combo piece in that type of deck. And maybe you can use Merlin Squirrel in the very, very particular decks that are looking for 2-piece combos that are just overwhelming. Maybe. But outside of that, 2/1 quest for 1 for 2 are very weak stats. And I'll typically pass on the Squirrel, but I'm going to give him 1 star for that extreme combo deck where Merlin Squirrel will allow you to dig pretty deep for that card you need. Here we have Peter Pan's Shadow, a 2/3 for 4 non-inkable quests for 2 evasive character. Okay, so far it's a non-inkable Pongo. Yeesh. Okay, also has Rush, so you can challenge with the Shadow as soon as it enters the battlefield. But with 2/3 stats line, you're unlikely to want to challenge very many things. I mean, you can challenge a 2/2, so I guess a 1-drop. And he has the ability Tiptoe. Your other characters which rush gain evasive. That's interesting. So, okay. But normally when you're playing your rush character, you're playing these big beaters like Maui, who suddenly just come in with big challenges, big stats, and try to take down opponent characters. Mostly Maui and Rafiki are the rush characters that I've seen most of the first chapter. So then I ask you the question, do you really want your Maui to have evasive? Well, evasive's not that useful for questing with these big bullies. It's really more, you can't just finish them off with your little 1-drops. You're going to have to be careful about exerting your big targets because my Maui's still alive and still gonna pack a punch. For Rafiki, well, it's not as relevant because Rafiki typically only lives for 2 combat. So overall, the Tiptoe ability is not that great. It's not like you're going to be playing a big rush character, do a tackle, and then I'm going to be questing for the rest of the game. Also, if Peter Pan's shadow gets removed, then suddenly your other rush character becomes vulnerable, so you can kind of get 1 birded by 2 stones. 2 birded by 1 stones? I don't know. Make a verb out of this and let me know in the comment below what that verb sounds like. As for Peter Pan's shadow, I don't think it's an overly great card. I think it has some potential, and like, it's a Pongo with benefits when you get to play him. It's a Pongo with downsides if you're running high on uninkables. And I think you're going to be running high on uninkables since we have so many powerful uninkable cards. And I don't think it's going to see much play, but I'm going to give him a 3-star rating because, I mean, Pongo with upsides, there's potential there. I don't know, the angel and demon in my head say, no, this is a 2-star, no, this is a 3-star. I'm going to rate it a 3-star and move on. Here we have Pinocchio, the star attraction of our circus, a 1/1 for 2 non-inkable quests for 3. Alright, with no abilities. His ability is to quest for 3. So, the idea is you now have Maleficent questing for 2 as a 1-drop. You now have Pinocchio as a 2-drop questing for 3. Which means that you can quest for 2, quest for 5, and suddenly you're at 7 lore on turn 3. Which is a lot of lore. The opponent must answer these threats. Now the downside is they have 1 willpower, which means they get pinged by Tinkerbell and suddenly your board is gone. They get pinged by Hans, pinged by New Robin Hood, so you have to be very careful about them. Well, they're very fragile characters. But when you're playing a very aggressive strategy, getting these extra points of lore, if you can put a bodyguard in front of them, like Simba or the new prince, and you can just hold the fort for 2 or 3 turns, you're in good shape because you're about to win the game. Or you can even bounce Pinocchio after questing and just play him again. I would prefer if he was inkable, but with the 3 lore I understand why he's not, and he's definitely worth not being inkable. He's going to be played along with Maleficent in an aggressive deck near you and deserves a 4-star rating. Here we have Pinocchio on the run, a 3/3/4/5 non-inkable quest for 2. Stats, little subpar for a 5-drop, so he needs a stellar ability. Shift 3, so you can play him on top of the cheaper Pinocchios. That's always nice. And when you play this character, you may return chosen character or item with costs 3 or less to their player's hand. Okay, so the ability is decent. You can use it to bounce an opponent's character, and especially on the Shift 3, you can go Element of Surprise, suddenly my mini Pinocchio becomes a big Pinocchio, I bounce one of your threats, I challenge the other one, and I still have a 2 quester on the battlefield afterwards. That's alright. So it's mostly to bounce the opponent's characters that I see Pinocchio on the run being useful, because if you're going to be bouncing one of your own characters, well, you're either spending the shift and then you have the base Pinocchio, the Pinocchio on top, 2 cards, the original cost plus the new Pinocchio cost starts to add up to a lot of cost to self-bounce a character, which the Madam Min cards do in a much better fashion. So Pinocchio's okay to bounce opponents' characters, but he's an uninkable 5-drops, which means you're committing to playing Pinocchio. And if you're playing him on turn 5, well, you probably don't care that much about the 2 or 3 drops that the opponent has in play. It's more these 4 and 5 drops that are troublesome, and Pinocchio's not able to match them stats-wise. So overall, I don't think it's a fantastic card. It has some uses, but I think it falls within that 3-star rated character where it's alright. We have Pinocchio, a non-inkable 2-drop. He's a 1/1, quest for 1, and he's telling lies. He's telling you, I'm gonna be good, put me in your deck. Yes, you know it to be true. Because, well, his abilities, when you play him, you may exert chosen opposing character. What that really means is that it allows you to challenge an opponent's character during this turn. Or maybe you can play I'm stuck and then freeze them in that state. But that's getting expensive in terms of cards type combo. The problem is Pinocchio has no stats to speak of. He's not inkable, which is a problem. It means you're forced to play him, and you really want to invest into this, aha, you're going to be challenged. In general, I'll say no. There is one exception though. In the Madame Mim decks, you can reuse Pinocchio, and because he's a cheap character that has this reusable ability, and he's in the Amethyst ink, well, maybe a couple of Pinocchios included in your deck might make sense, because you're really using them as repeatable actions and fodder to bring back to your hand for Madame Mim. And there aren't very many 1 and 2 drops with usable enter the battlefield ability. So because of that, I'm gonna give Pinocchio a 2-star rating in general, but a 3-star rating because of the potential use in the Madame Mim decks. Here we have Winnie the Pooh, Honey Wizard, 5/5 for 5, quest for 2, pure power creep over Jumba Jacuba, who was a 4/5. But overall, Winnie the Pooh is a very nice foil to add to your binder because the artwork is so fantastic. But without an ability, a 5-drop is kind of meh. And even though he is slightly power crept in quest for 2, maybe he'll deserve a spot in your inkable 5-drop, but you're much better off playing something with a good ability, and especially with 2 sets in the bank, there are better options out there. So I'm gonna have to give Winnie the Pooh a 1-star rating. Here we have Yzma, scary beyond all reason, 4/4 for 6, inkable, quest for 2. Shift 4, shift's not as important. When you play this character, shuffle another chosen character into that player's deck, and that player draws 2 cards. So you can target your weakling character that you don't use anymore and change it into some card draw. That's a nice upside. But what you really want to do with it is banish or actually shuffle an opponent's character back into their deck. If you can hit a 5, 6, or 7 drop with Yzma, you've gained a huge tempo advantage. You're gonna say, but it's 2 card, Genius Yoshi. Sure, it's 2 card, but you've gotten rid of a card and you've given back 2 to your opponent. So the opponent ends up with a +1. But you've gone and made a huge tempo swing on the battlefield. Think about the Sapphire Hades. When you play the Sapphire Hades, you banish a character, but you give the opponent more ink. So it's actually just a neutral in that case. You don't give +1, you don't -1 the opponent, you just trade a card for ink. And that card is extremely powerful because of the tempo swing, because it's a nice removal spell that at the end of the turn, at the end of your opponent's turn, they had a character, you had nothing. At the end of your turn, suddenly you have a character and they have nothing. And Yzma does the same thing, which is extremely important in Amethyst, which doesn't have much in terms of removal. So if you're looking for a good card to include in Ruby Amethyst, Yzma is the perfect example. Also, on the comparison with Hades, Yzma costs a full 1 ink less and is inkable. So early game, this card doesn't get stuck in your hand, it just goes to the ink. Whether you want to play Yzma in your flex spots or as a full-fledged 4/of for the removal for your Amethyst deck, Yzma is a definite inclusion that you should be considering every time you play Amethyst. And because of this, it deserves a 5-star rating. This card is awesome. Here we have Isma without beauty sleep, and man does Isma deserve and need his beauty sleep. He's an inkable 3-drop, 3/4 of stats with 1 lore. It's the exact same stats as the wardrobe, which is where Isma should be hiding, and it's going to be as played as the wardrobe, which is nowhere to be seen and deserves this 1-star rating. Here we have Gruesome and Grim, one of my favorite arts on cards that we've seen so far. Just so awesome to see Madam Min with the shadow behind it. But back to the card, it's a song, costs 3, non-inkable. What does it do? Play a character card that costs 4 or less for free from your hand, and it gains Rush. And at the end of your turn, you have to banish it. So, as a temporary measure, you get extra firepower on the battlefield. In general, not an overly great card since you lose the character, but allows you to get that extra punch in, and if you can kind of trade with something, then you've lost Gruesome and Grim and the extra card to gain a free ability on the battlefield. So not overly great, but there's a reason there's a Madam Min on the card, because if you play a character for free with Gruesome and Grim, you get the abilities of that character, you get a combat in with that character, and then you bounce it back, well, you can't banish it, it's no longer on the battlefield. So suddenly, Gruesome and Grim gives you extra value as a song, and especially with all these Merlins. You can gain lore off of the playing it and off of the bounce back into your hand, or even if you have to banish it, you can get the second trigger. Maybe it's a draw card Merlin to just compensate for the Gruesome and Grim's ability, but I think it's a great card in the Madam Min deck. Maybe there's going to be some uses and niche strategies here and there for this card, but it's definitely worth a 4-star rating for its usage in Madam Min bounce shenanigans. Next on our list we have I'm Stuck, a very cheap action. So just for 1, chosen exerted character can't ready at the start of their next turn. So it's a freeze ability that doesn't exert the opponent's character. So you need an opponent's character to be exerted, and you're going to be spending a whole card to gain the tempo of the 1 turn. Now, if you have a lot of cards in hand, say you're playing Ruby Amethyst, for example, then maybe you can afford to spend a card here and there for that ability to just freeze your opponent, force them to develop more, and then you play Be Prepared, and it doesn't really matter. You've gotten more value out of your Be Prepared, you sacrifice your I'm Stuck, so it doesn't matter too much. And if we get a lot more card draw, then I'm Stuck can see some play. But overall, I do not like spending a whole card for a situational effect like that. That's really just save 1 turn for 1 character. Feels a little weak to me. It is a cheap action, and there's a lot of action matters type of ability, so it can be played. Also, it's inkable, so you can add a couple in your deck as your flex spots. So maybe it's going to see some play as flex spots, maybe in Ruby Amethyst, maybe in other types of action matters deck. So I'm going to give it a 3-star rating, but be very careful about the cost, the very real cost of playing 1 card, and not just the 1 ink on the card. Here we have Excalibur, the legend of the sword and stone, the song about Excalibur. This is super exciting. It's an inkable 2-drop. What does it do? Chosen character gets Challenger 3 this turn. Ugh. Why would I want to give Challenger 3 to a character and waste an entire card for it, while I can just be playing another 2-drop character instead? Because it's a song, and songs are great. Not this one. This one feels like Hakuna Matata, which you probably don't want to play. We have much better songs. I mean, it's much better to go meet your friend on the other side than to try and pull that thing out of the stone, because it's just not worth it. I'm going to give it a 1-star rating, even though it's a cheap song. Here we have Binding Contract, a 4-drop item with For All Eternity. You exert the item, you exert one of your characters, and you exert one of the opponent's characters, or any character, but it's really meant to be targeting one of the opponent's one. this is kind of the ability that the 3-drop Elsa has right now, which allows you to challenge these unexerted characters that the opponent has. And the advantage of Binding Contract is you can use any character you want to pay the cost. What I don't like about the Binding Contract is the fact that it's uninkable and 4. That is super expensive. You're committing to playing all the Binding Contracts that you are drawing. It's part of your contract. And 4 is a lot to pay for something that has no immediate impact. And I don't think it's worth it. I think if you want that type of ability, just play the 3-drop Elsa instead. Yes, she's weak to removal, but she does it by herself, which Binding Contract might be a one-of in Ruby Amethyst list as another one of these items that's meant to control whatever the opponent is doing, and once you've established a nice board presence, Binding Contract allows you to make sure the opponent just doesn't play something that will quest and you can't remove it. But normally you'd be playing removal instead. So yeah, Binding Contract, I'm not a big fan of. I'm going to give it a 2-star rating because the ability is still pretty strong, but I think the cost is too high, and just look for a better deal when looking at contracts. Here we have the Croquet Mallet with Hurtling Hedgehog. So it's a 1-drop uninkable item, and you can just banish the item whenever you want and give rush to a character. So it's kind of a very, very cheap single-use pocket watch, which if it was inkable, I'd be fine with. Maybe I'd prefer that over the pocket watch. But it is not inkable, so you're committing to playing your Croquet Mallet. I don't know. I don't think it's worth an uninkable slot to have a rush when you want to a character. Now there's some characters like Aladdin that can really benefit from rushing out of nowhere. And I mean, as long as you have the Croquet Mallet in play, the opponent has to be mindful that you can give rush to anything at any time. And so they have to be a bit more careful with how they exert their characters. And maybe that pressure is worth playing the 1-of Mallet in your deck, or 2 copies in your Ruby Amethyst instead of the pocket watch, just to keep the opponent on their toes, force them to make bad decisions, and when the timing is right, just activate the ability and get that rush in. You don't want too many of these because you're out of inkables, or you just have a bunch of those on the battlefield, and well, what are you going to do with a bunch of Croquet Mallet? I mean, it's a flamingo, and flamingo with their legs stuck, so don't expect to go too far with just Croquet Mallets. So overall, the effect has a good element of surprise. If this was inkable, I'd really like it. I'm still going to give it a 3-star rating because the pocket watch has been doing well, and a cheaper alternative might do the trick. I do like the fact that you don't need to pay anything on the turn where you're activating the ability, as opposed to the pocket watch, which forces you to pay 1. So it's a smaller investment in terms of ink and cards, but a bigger investment in terms of uninkable. That's what I think about this. Perplexing Signposts, a very confusing card. It's an item that costs 2, and you can banish the item to return chosen character of yours to your hand. So it's an item, so it plays well with item synergies, but it's really a bounce spell under the form of an item that is uninkable. So I like the fact that since it's an item, you can play it even though you don't need it right away, so that you can activate the ability for free at a later turn. And with a bunch of enter the battlefield abilities, the healing potential of it, it's actually pretty decent. If you could activate it during your opponent's turn, it'd be fantastic, but we're not this type of trading card game yet. And again, it's in Amethyst, so it plays well with Madam Min shenanigans, where if you don't have the Madam Mins, you have the Merlins. You can get bonus value out of these Merlins. It's somewhat similar to Mother Knows Best. That's the emerald card that bounces one of anything as a song, which you can get the benefit of casting it for free, so I slightly prefer Mother Knows Best to Perplexing Signposts. It's just a bit more flexible. But you have to be playing Emerald in order to have access to this card. This is an interesting alternative in Amethyst. Overall, it's playable. Do I think it's groundbreaking? No. But it's playable in certain circumstances. So I'm going to give it a 3-star rating. Not the best. Definitely a lot of fun. Definitely confusing. And I really like the picture. Are we looking this way? Are we looking that way? Let me find out. Here we take a look at the Sorcerer's Spellbook. A 3-drop non-inkable item with knowledge. Just exert it, pay 1 and gain 1 lore. Very simple, very effective, and you can use it on the turn you play it, which is an upside. There aren't many ways to just gain lore outright without letting your opponent any way to prevent it. What I don't like about the spellbook is that it's non-inkable, and we're limited with the amount of non-inkables we can play in our deck, and I'd much rather have the flexibility of having character in play, because the character can have, well, more ability than just quest for 1, for starters. It doesn't cost you anything to quest with the character, as in the spellbook costs you 1 ink, and you have the option to do combat with your character and do some challenges. So a character is a lot more flexible than the spellbook. The spellbook can also just get destroyed by Beast Hard-Headed. That's the downside. The upside is that if you're playing board wipes, any kind of symmetrical character destruction effects like Be Prepared, their spellbook remains and just keeps on gaining 1 lore a turn. So with the quick activation ability that's unpreventable, the fact that you can prevent Be Prepared from wiping it out, I'm going to give it a 2-star rating because I suspect control players are going to be all over the Sorcerer's Spellbook, but I do not like it, and I think we're still better off just playing stronger characters like Elsa, Spirit of Winter. Well, there's a lot of strong characters that we can play. So I don't think the Sorcerer's Spellbook is worth it, but I'm still going to give it 2 stars for that quick activation, 1 lore. You can't stop it. I hope that you've enjoyed this set review featuring all the Amethyst cards from Rise of Floodborn. We've been bouncing around from card to card with Mad Mins and Merlins and Fairy Godmothers that look amazing. So Amethyst looks like it's been gaining some new tools, even some removal in the ink, which I'm very excited to try out in some decks. Lots of cool shenanigans to try out, so make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on those fantastic videos. I'm also looking forward to hearing your thoughts on the set, so let me know in the comments below what is your favorite card in Amethyst ink for Rise of the Floodborn. On that note, look forward to the other ink reviews coming soon, and I'll see you next time.